Our 2010 Workforce Summit was a critical event. It allowed the San Diego Workforce Partnership to bring together some of our region's boldest leaders and thinkers, and to talk about the economic challenges that we currently face as a region, and to put on the table real and innovative solutions to address those economic challenges and create job growth within our region. We hope that you'll find the video that you're about to watch and the excerpts from that day as interesting and as innovative as we have. And we hope that it will spur you and your organization to take action and to join us as we collectively work to create jobs throughout our region and solidify a stronger economic future for San Diego.
Good morning, and welcome to the San Diego Workforce Partnership's 2010 Workforce Summit, brought to you by Qualcomm, Sempra Energy, and CareFusion.
Lorena, I'm going to start with you. As our region's most visible labor leader, what are your reactions to Dr. Reich's comments and solutions that you would like to offer to the local job market?
On the whole, I completely agree with a lot of what was said. Those who know me dearly will know I'll blame a little bit more on our offshoring of jobs than former Secretary of Labor Reich would. But I think his overall analysis of the structure of what's happened in our economy is very accurate and something we've been talking about a lot. It's really become an hourglass economy with a service sector who has largely been left behind. And I think that where I would differ, though, is in addressing that service sector. While we do need to find ways to increase the number of folks who can actually come up and take new innovative jobs and really create a job market in San Diego, I think we have to really look at how we're treating that service sector. And that's what's so often neglected. And unfortunately, I think what we so often say is it's just going to happen. There's going to be those at the bottom. And what we try to do in organized labor is make sure that those at the bottom aren't at a place where they're not able to have children or to have the next generation actually move up that chain. So if we just accept that the service sector is going to continue to decrease and depress wages in order to become some sort of low-wage opportunity, then we're really neglecting the future of who can come up and take those innovative, educated jobs. I know I heard briefly backstage somebody addressing the teachers union and maybe the waiting for Superman argument. Well, if you actually watch that movie, the number one thing that they even address, the number one indicator on whether a child will do well in school is the income of the parents and the ability for the parents to be involved in school. If you have low-wage workers who are working 60 hours a week and can't even sustain a life, it is very tough to believe that a child can go to school not having had health care, not having had breakfast in the morning, possibly living in their car, and do well in school. We can't just throw away the service sector and accept the fact that they're going to be low-wage workers without protections. If you look at what the economy did in the 1950s and the 70s and where we went from growing our economy to stagnating our economy, it was because there were strong unions, basically. And with strong unions, you actually increase the wages, even in the manufacturing industry, which is now what we're kind of looking at the service sector like. So where you have unions, you have the ability of workers to have health care, to have a living wage, to be able to work maybe 40 or 50 hours a week rather than 50 or 60 hours a week. You have the ability of parents to actually facilitate the upward mobility of their children. And so obviously in organized labor, we know that the best way to create a middle class or to create the upward mobility is through unionization. It allows higher wages, it allows obviously the right to bargain for workplace conditions. And so I think that it's really important to focus on that sector as well as a way to look at the future of our economy. In San Diego, for example, in order for an individual to even just maintain and not live in poverty, if they had a job that provided health care, and in the service sector, if you have a job that provides health care, it's because it's a union job, they would have to make $14 an hour just to not live in poverty if they were a single person. Now, if they had a family, that would have to go up to about $27 or $28 an hour. It's just not happening. When we allow our retail or our janitorial, our hotel, our service sector to be minimum wage jobs with no health care, there's just not the opportunity to even get the parents out of poverty. And so when you're talking about educating a new workforce, it becomes extremely difficult to suggest that children, although there are the exceptional cases, but children who are battling a number of things that many of us can't even imagine could go to school and bring themselves out of poverty without that number one indicator of how they will do well. And that's with parents whose incomes are sustainable, who are in a self-sustaining position, who have a roof over their head, who have food on the table, and who are able to at least participate in their children's education. So I really liked what he said. I just wouldn't want the acknowledgement that we're going to have this lower level service sector to be ignored and just accepted that that's going to be a low wage without opportunity career choice.
I do want to address something about Robert Reich. Secretary Reich's analysis, we agree with completely at Green for All. We really do think the issue is wages, and what we say is we're trying to build a clean energy or a green economy strong enough to lift people out of poverty. Our real mission is to build a new middle class. And I know that's what you're all trying to do here in San Diego. So what are some key things we can do in San Diego, which is really well positioned to build a new middle class? We think there are 5 general things to do in any regional economy, and you're doing pretty well on most of them, but there are some areas where you could improve. One is you absolutely have to invest in infrastructure. And I think Secretary Reich addressed that right off the bat. And I'm going to talk about what that means for the green economy in a second. So invest in infrastructure, foster creativity and innovation. Arguably, San Diego is right up there with Silicon Valley in holding that as one of the highest values of the region, and really to be applauded for that. Third, focus on manufacturing, and Robert Reich talked about that. And manufacturing jobs, on average, will almost get you to the middle class versus service sector jobs, which unfortunately have not had that same ability to put people into the middle class. And I think, again, San Diego has the opportunity to grow its manufacturing base. Not something that people talk about, but I think it's essential for this region. Fourth, is to align your workforce development system and your approach with your economic development strategy. Radical. Actually, it is in this country. Oftentimes, these two systems do not work together. They're different funding streams. Redevelopment agencies do other things. Community development block grants go one place. WIA dollars go another place. They don't talk to each other. Different funding stream, different goals, different philosophies. They need to come together. And I think that's something that the Workforce Partnership here in San Diego is trying to align. And fifth, to Lorena's point, we have to acknowledge the importance of organized labor and community-based organizations in helping us to create a comprehensive strategy which will help address low-income people and people of color, getting them into a pipeline which leads to career pathways for good middle-class jobs. Okay, how do we create the new ones in the green economy? Here's what we need to do. When I talked about focus on infrastructure, where we need to go is to go where there are leverage points. What we know is in this deep, deep Great Recession, the only money flowing, folks, is from the federal government, right? And we have a commitment into green economy, into clean energy, into things like transportation reauthorization, perhaps into water systems. So we at Green for All, look at where the money's going. You know, we're like D.B. Cooper. Why did you rob that bank? Because that's where the money is, right? So we think, here, we know we're going to transition to a clean energy economy. Let's look at energy efficiency upgrades in our building stock, right? 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. And in fact, if you retrofit, if you upgrade your building to be more energy efficient, over time, it saves you money. It pays for itself. So let's set up a system where we can train people to do that work. That can't be offshored, by the way. It has to stay where the buildings are. But let's get people into training systems that aren't just one-off jobs of doing retrofits, but get them into a union apprenticeship program so they can move up the chain of construction careers. Maybe then soon they'll move on to advanced lighting systems or advanced water systems. But let's get folks into a career path, starting with some of the energy efficiency upgrades. We've done this very effectively in Portland, in Seattle. There's about $500 million of money flowing from the federal government to 35 communities across the country to set up these programs. San Diego should be focused on this. Second, we're looking at transportation investment. There's a $500 billion reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act that's pending in Congress. Regardless of who controls the purse strings in Congress, Republican or Democrat, this is serious money, and this is the backbone of our country. We need to think about how we can leverage those investments to not only create good-paying construction jobs, to build the roads, to build the rail systems, to build the high-speed rail system. Yes, I do believe in high-speed rail. We not only have to do that, but can't we build some of the component parts for some of these transit systems? Can we build component parts for light rail systems, heavy rail systems, high-speed rail, or buses? These are not difficult things to do. We have the inherent productive capacity in this country. Let's take a look at what we have existing on our manufacturing base, what can be repurposed to build these component parts, and let's actually build more of it here. We have in the United States the Portland model. We have streetcar works that has just been started. Right now they're sourcing about 20% of their streetcars are sourced locally, their component parts. By January, they will have entered into subcontracts with component part manufacturers so that 90% of all of the component parts are manufactured in the United States. This one company is trying to rebuild the streetcar industry in the United States. We should be able to do that here in San Diego because you have a substantial commitment to transit here in San Diego. Another area, water. You cannot come to San Diego and not talk about water infrastructure and water investment, okay? We have to conserve, we have to be smarter about how we use it, we have to reduce, reuse, recycle, green roofs, grassy swales. I could go on and on about water, it's a personal passion of mine, but I also think there are probably some interesting new jobs trying to get us into green infrastructure. Well, let's figure out what those jobs are. How do we get our kids coming out of high school with the community college system to get certifications as hydrologists, as smart meter installers and maintenance providers? How do we get people to become green roofers? Let's set up a chain of certification of certain classifications where they can take that classification and move around the region and have good quality water infrastructure jobs. And then finally, let's talk about biofuels. Another big investment is the energy infrastructure for fuels in this country. Here in San Diego, you are on the cutting edge of an algae biofuel industry. And I want to applaud Cleantech San Diego for pulling down $4 million of workforce development money to try to figure out what the jobs of the future will be in that sector. That's the type of collaborative, forward-thinking approach that it's going to take to send San Diego off into growing really good jobs for a whole scale, a whole spectrum of workers here in the region. We can't just focus on lab coats in San Diego. We also have to focus on folks graduating from high school who may or may not be able to attend four-year colleges, postgraduate programs, PhD programs. I want to just stop with one other thought. There's a great model coming out of Chicago. The Austin Polytechnic Academy, which is aimed at trying to produce super techs, kids that do advanced manufacturing. They're in the worst part of Chicago, they've taken over a school, and they're teaching kids how to do all that advanced precision manufacturing that Secretary Reich was doing. This all happening in the worst part of Chicago, and they're about to graduate their first class this year. That model is now being replicated in the San Francisco Bay Area. They've already come to Los Angeles to talk about how to bring it to LA. I would recommend that San Diego take a look at what they're doing in Chicago and ask them to come down and talk about how we can do something here in San Diego. But these are the kinds of investments where San Diego can position itself to grow new jobs in the green economy in a sustainable way, not just environmentally, but economically, so that we don't have this huge divide in our class structure, so that we are all growing together.